Hi everyone, it's Matt. Today I wanted to show you a little bit about doing some Docker containers with Docker Compose on the Synology NAS. This is specifically for Synology NAS, however a lot of what we're covering in here works on Mac, on Windows, on Ubuntu, other flavors of Linux. It really doesn't matter for the whole. There's a couple of specific Synology things in here which I wanted to touch on. However, this video I really wanted just to do something for the Synology guys on the site. So what we're going to be installing is a bunch of more common applications, so Plex, some downloading tools, Radar, Reader, stuff like that. Of course, I don't condone what you may or may not download with these tools. However, I'm happy to show you what these show you how to install these tools. How you configure them, I guess, is up to you. So I do want to mention that I'm not installing a VPN as part of this process, and you would normally, if you were doing something like using Qubit Torrent, you would normally put that under a VPN. A VPN's got a couple of extra steps, so I think that deserves a separate video. So for this demonstration, I'm leaving that out. So just be aware that if you do follow along with these steps, that there isn't a VPN for Qubit Torrent, so be very careful of using that without a VPN. I'll put the links to this site in the about description for the video, but it's github.com/petersem/docker-demo. Really, this is designed more as a demo. However, it will be functional as well. So let's open let's go over to DSM, and if you log into DSM, and then go to Control Panel. Now under there, go to Terminal and SNMP, and enable a thing called SSH. This stands for Secure Shell. We're going to be using effectively a terminal to run a couple of commands to create these containers. Normally with SSH, I'd recommend also changing the default port to something different. Just for the sake of this video, I'm just going to leave it as the default. But that I would recommend, moving forward, that you change it, like 202 or whatever port that kind of isn't used but is unusual, I guess. So click Apply. Gives you a nice little warning, which you can ignore. Okay, so we've done that. The next thing I wanted to do was, we can close this now and go to the file station. And I just want to check that you've got a couple of folders here. Now, I presume you've already installed Docker. If you haven't, go to the Package Center, type in Docker. Now I've already got it installed. And we'll see what these are. I don't know what Docker Utilities is. I'm going to have to see what that is. That's something new. But generally, I don't use any of the utilities for Docker through the GUI. I do everything from the command line. So install Docker. Once you've done that, let's go back and look at the folders. So you should have a Docker folder, right? It'll probably be empty. You may have done something in it, but it'll probably be empty. I don't recall whether you, out of the box, get a downloads folder. If not, I need you to go and click Create and create a new share called Downloads. And then within Downloads, I want you to create a folder called Complete and Incomplete. This is going to be for where files will come down whilst they're coming down, and once they've finished coming down, they'll kind of stage through these directories. That's it as far as DSM goes. So we can ignore that now and close our browser and go over to our whether it's a command prompt or a Mac terminal or a PowerShell. It really doesn't matter what you've got open. Or even a Linux terminal if you're running on a Linux workstation. The command's going to be the same. So it's SSH for Secure Shell, and then put in the username that you log onto your NAS with, and then the @ sign, and then the IP of your NAS. Okay, now just so you know, I'm not installing all of this stuff on my NAS because I've already got it all on my NAS. So I'm actually pointing to a different Unix box at the moment. The process is, I've tried to make it look almost exactly the same from a terminal's perspective as it would be on the NAS. So it should be pretty much the same, but just to be aware, I'm actually not pointing to my Synology now. So then it'll prompt you for a password. Pop in your NAS password, and then you're in. Now, one thing I want you to do is type in ID. Now, this will give you a value for your logged in user that we're going to need to pass into our containers when we create our containers. So the values you want is the UID and the GID. All right, so if you get those, it'll probably be something like 1026 or, like 101 or 100 or something like that for the group. But just jot those two values down on a piece of paper. On Linux systems, it's almost always 1000, which is easy. But Synology, it could be, 1026 or 1024 or something like that, and 100 or 101. Once you've got that there, with a small update, I did forget one point. It didn't stop everything from running, but if you don't do this, you could have some kind of permission issues and stuff like that. If you look on the GitHub site and just scroll down, I put a bunch of make directory commands here. It's better if you actually create these directories under your existing user. If you don't, you might be getting directories created as the root user, which might cause some permissions for you. So where you need to do this is when we went in and created our Plex container, before you run the Docker command to create the Plex container, copy what is here. In fact, you can do this at any stage, but copy, before you create the containers, that is. Copy what's here, go over to your terminal. It doesn't matter what folder you're in, and just paste in here those commands. Now, I've already got the folders there, but just go through, paste in the commands, it'll create all the folders you need. And then from there, you can go and continue on. So thanks very much. Yeah. We'll just whip back to our browser, and we need to grab a couple of files from the GitHub site. All right, so the easiest way on the GitHub site, which is github.com/petersem/docker-demo. The easiest way to get stuff here, you don't have to have Git or any fancy programming stuff. Go to this page, click where it says code, and click the download zip. Now that will download all the files in here. If we open those files up, I'm just going to drop these two files, the .env file and the docker-compose YAML file. I'm just going to throw them into my downloads folder. So they're in there. Because we need to make a couple of changes to one of these files before we put it onto the NAS. And to keep things simple, we'll just edit that on your Windows box or Mac or wherever you are. Okay, so we can close the compression utility that we just opened, and we want to look at the .env file. So if you right click on that, I would always recommend a good editor, Visual Studio Code or something like that, but Notepad++ is good. In a pinch, Notepad, but be very careful that you don't mess things up. I'll actually do it in Notepad because we don't have to change too much. Now, this is the only values that we need to change for all of our containers, and most of these I'm hoping will be what you've already got. So the PID of 1026 and the PGID would have been like 100 or 101. That's what I've got on my NAS. So you would change it to those values. The TZ means the time zone that you're running in. Now another useful link, and I'll put this into the description for the page as well, is on Wikipedia, which has a list of all the different locations in the world and what's called a TZ database name. All right, so if you go to the top here, you'll see TZ database name. This value is what we're going to need to be putting into our parameter file over here. So simple way to do it is find your city or your kind of region, and once you've found it, just copy that and paste it in there. All right, it doesn't change for me, obviously. Now, the next thing is the paths. Now, in 99.9% of cases, it's going to be volume 1 for most people. Some people might be volume 2. If you go to your NAS and type in CD / just so the way I remember / and / is up the hill, / is down the hill. So / volume 1. All right, and then if you type in ls, it's like a directory. Now, if you see a Docker folder in here, that means Docker is on your volume 1 folder. If you see the downloads folder here, it means your downloads folder is on volume 1. If you don't see them here, you might need to go and have a look at volume 2. I don't have a volume 2, so you might need to go and have a look there. The chances are you're going to be volume 1. So in here, this is where we're going to be storing all of our configuration information for Docker when it's running. So it's going to be volume 1 / Docker. So you probably won't have to change that. Your media path, if we go back on your terminal over here, you'll probably have another folder here for your media. It might be called media or multimedia or something like that. Now, I wanted just to touch on this because the easiest way with Plex and all of these tools is if you consolidate your media under one high-level folder. This is my opinion. There may be people out there that disagree, and certainly you can still use all of these tools, even if you've got separate top-level folders for TV, for movies, for music, or whatever the case is. I personally find it a whole lot easier just to have one top-level folder called media, and then underneath that I've got, TV, movies, music, whatever the case may be. I just find that easier. For this demonstration, I'm going to assume that you've got it all under one folder. So in my case, in your case, you would have under volume 1, you would probably have like a media folder or something like that, and then underneath that it would have all of the movies and TV and things like that. In my case, on this box, I don't actually have it here. My media is on a different location, so I've actually changed my file a little bit to reflect that. But in your case, it'll probably be something like this. So /volume /volume 1 / media or multimedia or whatever the case is. Your download path, we've just discerned that it was in volume 1. So your download path is going to be volume 1 /downloads and then complete that we created. And the incomplete is volume 1 downloads incomplete. There's lots of different ways that you can configure, hard links and stuff like that with Radar and Sonar and all of those tools. I'm just keeping it really basic here for the moment. However, I'd recommend that you look into things like hard links and might make 1 or 2 little changes in here. This next parameter is a thing called Watchtower. Now, Watchtower will automatically update your containers for you when there's updates available. So this particular implementation of what we're doing, this is also what I run as well, will automatically update everything as soon as it's ready to be updated. So there's zero touch needed for you to manage this moving forward. There are some limitations with how often you can run this if you're using a free or public or anonymous account. So I've actually set this is in seconds, I think it's 4 or 6 hours, every 4 or 6 hours or something like that. Just leave it. You don't have to be running it every 5 minutes or anything. It's just wasted CPU if you do. Now, the next section is really the only other thing that we've got to do here, and this is around Plex. Now, Plex is a bit of a funny one on NAS devices. You've got to supply a claim token, because normally when you install Plex, you would go, like localhost /web and the port number, just to do that initial configuration. And Plex looks for the fact that you're coming in on localhost. Now on a NAS, you don't have a screen, right? Or your screen is actually on another computer. So, and you're remote connecting to that NAS. So you can't type in localhost, because that's not the NAS. So the way around that is to supply Plex with a thing called a claim token. And when Plex starts up and it has a valid claim token, it's going to ignore the fact that you're coming in and trying to configure this from a different machine to what Plex is on. So I'll show you how to get that in a minute. That actually has a timeout of 4 minutes. So I'll actually put that in the very last thing that we do. Because once we put it in, once we request the claim code, we have to move fairly quickly to do it all in 4 minutes. The advertise IP, you probably won't have to put anything in here, but if you have a reverse proxy with a specific name for Plex, you would put your, like plex.dockerholics.com or something like that in here. Most people, some people have it, some people don't. You can probably just leave that blank. This next one I think is a really important one. I know this is about Docker, but I just wanted to mention these particular points. When you log on to Plex, it actually goes out to the Plex servers at plex.tv, which is fine from a authentication perspective. That's the only time it goes out to the Plex servers to get that information, to do that kind of initial login. The problem is that if the internet is down, you can't get out to Plex, and that means you can't log on to your machine and log on to your local Plex at home. Right, which is really frustrating, because when the internet's out, you probably want to watch something on TV. What you can do, though, is you can supply either a single IP or all your IPs on your LAN, and say if anything's coming in from any of those IPs, don't go out to plex.tv to authenticate. Just let them in. Right? I set it to my local network is 192.168.1.whatever. And the /24 basically says anything on my local network can authenticate to Plex without having to go out to the internet. You could, if you're just using one machine, you could put in a specific IP number, or you could put in a smaller range of IPs. I think you may be able to put it in comma separated as well, but I don't quite recall. To be honest, I'm generally the only one logging on from different machines and stuff like that, so I just put the whole network there. The last thing is to name your Plex server. Once it starts up, you can actually name it again anyway, but you can put that parameter in here just to make it a little bit easier. So that's it. That's all we've got to configure for our containers. So I'm going to move fairly quickly, because once I get the Plex claim code, it's on a timeout. So what we're going to do after I put that in, I'll save that file. I'll then copy it over to the NAS into the Docker folder that should be already there, and then I'll jump back to the terminal and we'll execute this container. So just so we've got plenty of time, we know everything's got plenty of time to get through. I'm just going to go to our Docker folder here. Now, I'm not actually going to do the copy when we do it, but I'll show you what to do. Okay, so if you go to plex.tv/claim, and keep in mind that 4 minutes after this is generated, it's invalid. So none of these things that you guys are going to be seeing will actually work anymore, but for me, they will. So if you just refresh that page, it will come up with a claim code. So we copy that very quickly. We go over to our Plex claim token, copy it in there, save the file, And then from over here, you would go upload, overwrite, and then you would go to your downloads folder and you would pick .env and docker-compose YAML. I'm not going to do that because I've already got live files on there. Excuse me. What I'm going to do, I'm going to jump over here. I'm going to put that Plex token into, so just imagine I did that upload and I've got the files here in a folder called Docker, and the .env is an invisible file. I'm just going to put in that Plex token into my file. So just ignore that. You won't have to do this, but I'm just doing it just to simulate. Okay. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm only going to start up Plex the first time because it could take a little while to run everything else. So the command that you would do, you would prefix your Docker commands with sudo. I'm on a different box, so I don't have to. So you would go sudo docker-compose up-d Plex. Once again, I'm on a slightly different version, so I don't have to put the dash in. So you put that in, press enter. Now that will then create your Plex container. So you've just installed Plex. It might take 30 or 40 seconds on your machine if you haven't pulled Plex down before. So just keep in mind that, it could be, to install all of these things, it could be a couple of minutes. If you go over to a new browser window and type in the IP number of your NAS, and then put in port 32400/web. And you now have a brand new Plex server that you can configure. So you would then log on and go from there. I'm not going to bother because I'm just going to delete that. But basically that would then step you through the installation process. Now I can at another video show you how to migrate from Synology to Docker and stuff like that as well. I'll leave that out of scope for now. So we just did Plex on its own here because I wanted to get that out of the way because we had the 4-minute timeout on the claim token. What I'm going to do is go back and install the rest of it. So I'm just going to remove that Plex token and it's going to install everything that's in our Docker Compose. Now this video is not about how to use Docker or what Docker is, it is how to use Docker Compose to a degree, but I'm not going through the Docker Compose in this video, which I'm happy to do. However, I wanted to try and keep it a little bit shorter. So you type in sudo space docker-compose space up-d. Now, once again, I'm on a slightly different box here, so I don't put the exact same command in, but it's almost the same. That will then start up everything else. So on your machines, it might take, a couple of minutes the very first time. After that, it's fairly quick. And almost there. In my Docker Compose, I've actually got some logic in there which is saying, don't start say, Sonar until, SAB-NZBD and Qubit Torrent are running. Don't start Tortuli until Plex is running and stuff like that. So you can build in kind of dependencies. I've also built in some what's called health checks as well, which will actually will show not just that a container has started, but it will show that it's healthy and that it's kind of passing a test. And if something goes wrong with that container, it's set up to actually try and restart that container, which will often fix the problem. If we go over to our browser again and put in the IP for your NAS and go to port 9000, right, this is Portainer. Now, I don't know whether you've seen Portainer. The first time it runs, it'll ask you for a user ID and a 12-character password, which is just sensational. And then create a user. Okay, now if we go into, sorry, I'll just go a little bit slower here, sorry. If you go into this particular thing, this is showing what your kind of Docker installation is. If we click on that and then go to containers, we've got 16 containers running, and you can see we now have everything installed. So that's pretty much it. So in most cases, you'll see the ports that things are running on as well. Not everything has a port. So Plex does, but you can actually access Plex either from the NAS IP number, or you can actually go in through plex.tv and then go in that way as well. But it's all there. So, you know, you can go to, for instance, let's go to Radar 211.7878, I think it was. Yep, Radar. And that's the new installation. Now I'm not showing you how to migrate your stuff from your existing installations over. There is certainly a process for that, and it's pretty simple. But this is just to show you that everything's running. So it's all there. It's all that quick. You know, the hardest part about this is really going and changing what's in those files that we created. Well, really just changing what's in that env file. So, you know, when we look at that file, there's only a couple of parameters in there that we've got to do. Now, once Plex is set up, this is ignored. We never have to do any of this Plex claim token stuff again. Yeah, it's just there. So really, that's the hardest part. You know, putting in a couple of paths, putting in what your ID is, what your time zone is, and a couple of different things for Plex, and then it's there. Now, just with all of these containers, without going into great detail, all the configuration for these containers is actually getting stored on your NAS. So even if these containers go down and just you know, get deleted or whatever the case is, all your configuration is there. Now, we've only configured one container to a degree so far, and that's Portainer, and that's with our login. What I'm actually going to show you now, I'm actually going to delete every single container that we've got. Docker compose down -v. So this is actually going to remove all of our containers. So it seems like a pretty freaky thing. If we actually type in, you would type sudo docker space ps. This lists all the containers that are running. There's none. Now, if I want to go back and run our up command again with no parameter, just the up-d, now that we've already downloaded the Docker images, it just basically recreates them and starts them. So it's that quick. So we've just, you know, recreated all those containers in, well, it's almost finished now, in just a couple of seconds. So I'll just wait for this last one to finish. I think that SAB's got a few dependencies on it as well. Oh no, SAB goes and then these have to start after SAB, yeah. Okay, so that's running. Now if I go back to our Portainer instance, which we deleted as well, and I go back in here, it's not asking me for a new user. It's asking me for the existing one that we pre-configured. So even though we deleted all of our containers, everything is still there. All our configuration is running, and it's still starting up some of those containers anyway. So look, that's it. Thanks very much. I'll post this video with a few links for the time zones, for the claiming of Plex, and for the Docker site. But really, you know, it's as simple as you download a couple of files, you edit your .env file, and you're kind of away. So yeah, simple as that. So anyway, thanks very much, and I hope to hear any feedback. Thanks, then.